Hi, my name is Renee, and this is my 4th mental health vlog. Just as a little bit of housekeeping, I am not a mental health professional, and just as a general boundary, unless you are my doctor or my therapist, please do not give me any health advice because you don't know the whole picture. This includes any recommendations for treatments, therapies, medications, or otherwise. And as a general recap, I struggle with ADHD, anxiety, depression, and past trauma. I recently pushed myself to the point of mental burnout, but I didn't realize it until it was already too late, and I was already at that point of burnout. Currently, I am just trying to recover. I have been on a leave of absence from work for about 3.5 weeks now. So what happened this week? I had a lot of different things happen this week, pretty much all positive. I didn't have too bad of a week in general. I do kind of feel like I am very, very slowly but surely getting a little bit better in my mental health. There are a couple of coping mechanisms that I have also been using that I wanted to talk about. First of all, I have been playing a lot of video games. I know that recently I had mentioned that I've been playing Neopets. Neopets, by the way, is a web-based game if you've never heard of it. I have been playing it since I was literally 10 years old, just on and off my entire life, and I recently came back to it because it's just a really, really great coping mechanism for me to be able to dive into this world that is similar to the real world, but just like the real world on easy mode, and it's just a whole lot of fun. It's also a whole lot of nostalgia for me playing it again, so that's a large part of the reason why I enjoy it. And at this point, a lot of the people on the website are people who are a similar age to me, who are also playing it for the nostalgia. And something really cool happened recently. Long story short about Neopets is that it has switched hands several times, and it is very recently under new ownership. And it seems like the new ownership is actually focusing on solving a lot of the problems that people have been having with Neopets. They have been putting a whole lot of money into revamping the site, so they fixed a lot of bugs that I had been having some issues with recently, so that makes me happy. And their new spokesperson is John Legend. I didn't see that coming, and apparently nobody else did either, so cool. They also talked about how they may want to collaborate with some creators. So if anybody from Neopets is watching this, hit me up. Another one of my coping things is that I tend to put a TV show on in the background that I've already seen. It's just a little bit distracting, and I will just sit and color. So my show of choice recently has been Schitt's Creek, and I have seen every episode of Schitt's Creek. It's one of my absolute favorite shows, which is kind of perfect for when I'm sitting down and coloring because I can look at what I'm coloring and I don't really have to pay a whole lot of attention to what's going on in the background because I've already seen it, so it's just kind of like a little refresher. Schitt's Creek is just amazing. One thing that I have noticed this past week, and I think it's related to the medication swap that I was mentioning last time, is that I have felt a lot more tired, just like physically tired in general, and it's been a little bit more difficult for me to fall asleep. I've still been getting a good amount of sleep, I've just been really tired. However, I have definitely felt a lot less anxious, so I will take tired over anxious any day. My threshold for social stuff is still pretty low. I'm good with doing like maybe 1 or 2 really light social things during the week. And when I say social stuff, I mean like being around people for a decent amount of time. So threshold for that, still pretty low, but my threshold for getting shit done has seemingly increased a little bit. I have been a little bit more productive this past week, which to me kind of signals that my brain is doing a little bit better, because before it just felt like I couldn't do anything and I had no motivation. I didn't want to get anything done, or when I tried to get stuff done, it would just make me anxious. So the fact that I'm actually able to get some stuff done, even if it's not everything that I want to get done, is progress. Again, healing is not linear, so progress is progress. This past weekend, my partner and I also went and rode on this really, really beautiful trail that's like the next town over from where we live. And we've walked this trail before, but we had never actually ridden bikes on it before. Really, really great trail for biking, honestly. It was really easy. It's actually paved all the way through, and it has tree coverage almost the whole way. So it's a really nice walk, and it's an even nicer bike ride. I also took my 360-degree camera with me, and I was able to film a lot of that bike ride, so that was really fun too. But it's always just nice to be out in nature, and it was really great timing because that was a pretty hot day, but we went like right after it rained, and luckily it was the kind of rain that rather than making everything all hot and steamy, it just kind of cooled everything down, and it was very, very nice. So that was just a nice, relaxing kind of get outside and do something kind of thing, and it's also just very beautiful scenery, which helps my brain overall. And then yesterday, I did a really difficult thing that has been a long time coming. I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but I just had a conversation with somebody in my life that the conversation really needed to happen, and I had had a lot of anxiety leading up to it. It had taken me a really long time to be able to even have this conversation. But overall, it went really, really well, and the other person that I had this conversation with and I both said that we felt a whole lot better about the entire situation. And y'all, communication is important. So many problems in life can just be solved by better communication. I'm just glad that everything turned out the way that it did, and despite the fact that it was still a good conversation overall, it was a really difficult conversation to have, and almost immediately after I had that conversation, I started getting a migraine with aura, which is another thing that I experience, but I experience it just usually like a few times a year at most. So let's talk about migraines with aura. Again, I am not a medical professional in any capacity. I am just talking about my own experiences. This is a lot of stuff that I have researched on my own, and I have actually gotten a diagnosis of migraines with aura from a neurologist. So I have gotten migraines with aura my entire life, and I just didn't know what they were. Basically what I experience, because migraines with aura can manifest a little bit differently person to person, but what I personally experience is I will have a flashing light in my vision in both eyes, and I think that's a specific thing from what I read online, is if it only happens in one eye, it's a whole different thing, but if it happens in both eyes, it's a migraine with aura. So I get this flashing light, and it's almost kind of like shaped like a crescent a little bit, at least most times it is. It's very similar to how it looks in your vision after you've looked at a really, really bright light and then you look away and you still have that light kind of like in your vision for a little while afterward. Yeah, imagine that, except it is directly blocking part of your vision, so it makes it really difficult for me to be able to read things. Like I really have to focus on it and almost kind of like use my peripherals to read things better, because looking directly at it, I won't be able to see things very well. Yes, it does make it difficult to drive. I try not to drive when I'm having a migraine with aura, but it'll start out where I will have a little bit of a blank spot in my vision. And because I have that blank spot, this is before the light flashing even happens. Because I have that little bit of a blank spot, it starts to make me feel a little bit disoriented. So it's almost kind of like I'm a little bit in a dream. And then after a few minutes of that, the flashing light will start happening. And that's usually the point where I'm like, oh, okay, that's why I feel weird, because I have a migraine with aura coming on right now. Okay, got it. And that flashing light will, for me, last around half an hour. A lot of times what'll happen is it'll kind of like fade in relatively quickly, like I said, usually a couple of minutes, and then it'll stay in one part of my vision. Sometimes it'll migrate a little bit. A lot of times it'll just kind of like migrate really, really slowly until it's all the way to the outer edges, and then I can't see it anymore. And then once the flashing lights kind of disappear, I will still feel very, very disoriented. I dissociate a lot, and it feels very dreamlike. A lot of times I'll just take a nap if I'm able to, because it's just a very uncomfortable feeling. And sometimes I will actually get the pain of a migraine once the flashy lights disappear. Generally, I don't get the pain while the lights are in my vision. It usually only happens after the lights are gone, and sometimes I don't get any pain whatsoever. Sometimes it's just the flashing lights in my eyes. And like I said, I usually only get those maybe 2 to 3 times a year on average. One of the things that I have realized is absolutely a trigger for them is stress. So it didn't really surprise me that much that I got one immediately after having a difficult conversation. But yeah, the long and short of it is when I was a kid, I did have migraines with aura. I don't remember a whole lot about them, but I do know that I had them even at a very young age, and I just never really knew what they were, and I thought that pretty much everybody had the same experience. And then when I was about 18 years old, I had my first full-time job, and my first full-time job, I worked in a call center. And it was also a very toxic work environment kind of call center. I worked in customer service, and it was one of, if not the most stressful job I've ever had in my life. And mostly because of the toxic work culture, but also because of the fact that I was 18. Like, I was fresh out of high school in my very, very first full-time job. I didn't even know what to expect, but there was one day when I was on the phone with a customer, and in the middle of this phone call, I didn't realize it because I didn't see the flashing lights. I was a little bit too distracted by what was going on with everything. Sometimes that's kind of the way that it goes, is that I won't necessarily notice that I have these lights in my vision, because it's less of like a direct thing and more of it like blocks your vision. And if you pay attention to it, you can see that it's like a flashing light thing. But because disorientation is also pretty common with migraines with aura, if I'm distracted by other things, I don't always realize it until I'm like deep into it. And this was also before I knew what a migraine with aura was. So I was 18 years old. I had been having migraines with aura my entire life. I just didn't know what they were, and they weren't super frequent, so I didn't really think very much of it. And On this particular day, I was exceptionally stressed. I hated my job. I was struggling to pay the bills. I was very depressed. I was on antidepressants for the first time in my life. And in the middle of one of the phone calls, I was trying to repeat a price back to a customer, and I could not say the words properly. The only thing that I can compare it to is when I was in middle school, I fell off my bike and got a concussion. And the way that my mom figured out that I needed to go to the hospital was because instead of me saying, I can't talk straight, I said, I can't tark slate. I mixed up the letters. And that was very similar to what was happening to me during this migraine with aura. Come to find out later down the line, if you're having a really, really severe migraine with aura, yes, it can actually affect your speech. I didn't know that at the time though, so I thought I was having a stroke. Yes, 18-year-old me thought I was having a stroke. So I got my coworkers' attention, they got my manager's attention, and they wound up calling ambulance despite me asking them not to because I knew that I couldn't afford an ambulance ride. But by the time the ambulance got there, the migraine and the aura had passed. So they checked my vitals and everything like that. We didn't actually leave. We just stayed there at my place of work, and they checked all these things on me, and they said everything seems normal. Your heart rate is a little bit elevated, but that's about it. Because at that point the migraine had passed, like nothing's gonna show up anyway. So I didn't know what was going on. I saw many different doctors. I saw ophthalmologists, I saw eye doctors because I knew that there was something going on with my vision at the same time, but I didn't know what. And then I waited several months to see a neurologist. I had an MRI and everything, and I took my brain scan to this neurologist and explained what I was experiencing. And before she even looked at the MRI, she immediately already said, oh yeah, that's a migraine. And you know, I seemed confused. I'm like, no, I don't have any head pain. And she explained what a migraine with aura was to me. And she also said that my primary care doctor should have known that. Needless to say, I was not very happy about how all of that went because I was a broke 18-year-old struggling to put food on the table, and I had spent a lot of time and a lot of money in order to get a diagnosis months down the line from a neurologist, something that my primary care doctor could have done had they been a little bit more well informed. So yeah, that's migraines with aura and my experience with them. And I had one the other day. It's the first one that I've had in probably a few months, but it did not surprise me that that was what happened immediately after. And I had called Becky and had talked to her about it a lot, and she reminded me that I needed to make sure that I did some self-care. So I took the rest of the afternoon just to kind of chill. I was going to film this video yesterday, but I was just like, you know what, I had too much. So just took a nap and relaxed instead, and that was fine. Which brings us to today and why I look the way that I do. So today, Becky and I went to see the Barbie movie. And yes, I did wear this to go see the Barbie movie because this Barbie is a little gothy and also doesn't own any pink clothing and was not about to buy pink clothing just to go to see a movie. So I went with what I know. I hate my neighbors and their motorcycles. Regarding the movie itself, I do have a lot of thoughts. Overall, I really, really loved it, and Becky did as well. But we're gonna put our thoughts into our next podcast episode. So if you don't follow the Anything But Appliances podcast, we do have a YouTube channel and a TikTok, and we are hopefully very soon going to record the next episode of that all about our thoughts on the Barbie movie. And I'm not going to give you any spoilers on what our thoughts were about or on the movie itself in this video here, but I will say that it was not all positive. Aside from the movie itself, we did also have one kind of annoying experience in the theater that I wanted to talk about. The theater that we went to is one of the theaters where you pick your seats. Like, they have reclining lounger things, and you go online, you buy your tickets, and you pick your seats. We had our seats specifically like almost in the middle of the theater. It wasn't like the center of the rows, but it was like the center row. It wasn't all the way at the top and it wasn't all the way in the front, which is exactly how we like it. Becky and I are also both neurodivergent, so we are not huge fans of change or confrontation. Speaking as somebody who is not a huge fan of confrontation, I get into confrontations a lot, but I digress. So we get to the theater. I was already a little bit late. The movie was supposed to start at 2 o'clock. I got there at like 2:05, grab our food and our drinks. We go to find our seats, only to find that there are other people in our seats. And not only that, but there's only one free seat in that entire row. So it's not like we can just go take 2 more seats, because there were not 2 more seats side by side. So the girls that took our seats seemed like they were like late teens, early 20s, something like that. And Becky and I are nice people. We don't want to start trouble. So we walked up and, you know, we just said, excuse me, these are our seats. seats, and we showed them our tickets that had those seats right on them. And their response was, yeah, we're so sorry, but other people had already taken our seats, so we had to find other seats. Y'all, if you're in a movie theater with reserved seats and somebody has taken your seat, the answer is not to take somebody else's seat and create a domino effect. So me being me and not wanting to start a problem, but wanting to find a solution that would actually help, I turned to these women and I said, look, I understand that it's not your fault, but I'm going to go find an employee so we can sort this all out. And they were like, oh, okay, thanks, no problem. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. And then Becky and I went to find an employee. And even though Becky and I understand that it was not our responsibility to do this, because realistically what should have happened is those women, when they found out that somebody else took their seat and those people didn't want to move, those women should have been the ones to go get the employee, but whatever. So Becky and I went and found the employee, we explained the situation, and I could tell by his mannerisms that this is not the first time that it's happened before. So he comes back in with us, he talks to the women, and then they all leave, I'm assuming to go talk to the other people who had taken their seats. And for anybody who's going to say that it's not that big of a deal, the seats of the women who took our seats were at the very back corner of the theater. First of all, I don't know why anybody would want to take those seats. Well, I have a couple of ideas, but I'm not going to entertain them. But number one, who would want those seats? But number two, I couldn't even find two seats together anywhere else in the theater. So if we were just going to continue the domino effect, it would mean the two of us having to split up into two different seats. Not only two different seats, but two different seats probably at the way back of the theater. All of this to say, if you go to a movie theater and there's reserved seating and somebody is in your seat, again, please do not start the domino effect. Just go talk to an employee. They'll sort it all out. But after the movie was over, Becky and I just went out to the parking lot and just kind of hung out and chatted for a little bit. And I did happen to ask her whether or not it seemed to her like I seemed like I was doing better mentally, because it's kind of a good unit of measurement to see how I'm doing week to week, because she doesn't see all the in-between. It's a little bit easier to see if there's a difference. So I had asked her if it seemed like my mental health had gotten any better, or if it seemed like I was just doing any better in general, and she said yes. She said that the way that we handled the situation in the theater, it seemed like I was doing a lot better in that particular instance, and just, you know, the fact that I'm somewhat social and able to go into a movie theater at all is a good thing. So there was a reason why I told you the theater seat story. But yeah, I'm just glad that I feel like for me, I'm doing a little bit better in my head, and I'm also really glad that other people are noticing as well, because that's just a really big deal for me. This week had its ups and it had its downs, but overall I do still feel like I am doing better than I was last week, and that is about all that I can ask for. And even if some weeks are not as good as other weeks, that doesn't mean that I'm not still making progress. So I am just pretty happy with how everything is going overall. I feel like I am starting to come out of this like mental burnout that I have been in. I feel like I'm starting to get back into being myself a little bit more, if that makes sense. So yeah, this week has been pretty decent. And finally, I have one sort of social media update. So I mentioned earlier that yesterday, after I had had that very difficult conversation, that I did some self-care, and part of that self-care was opening some packages. So normally I would do a mail time video and I would show me unboxing the packages I received. But since I was having a difficult day yesterday and I was trying to do some self-care stuff, I just opened some of the packages and decided I'll do the thank yous now instead. First of all, I was sent this mug. It's not coffee, it's a mug that says coffee makes everything possible. And the note says, I know you said you needed large mugs or travel mugs, but this mug said it needed to be yours, from Jenny. So thank you, Jenny. It is adorable. And I appreciate that it's double-sided, because I'm left-handed and a lot of times mugs are right-handed. And you wouldn't think that that would matter, except for the fact that if you have a right-handed mug in your left hand, most times they'll only put the design on one side. So if I hold it in my left hand, I'm the only one that can see the design. I like the dual mugs because then you can see it on both sides. So that was sent to my P.O. box, and I had another package that was from my mental health wish list that I mentioned last video, and it was a coloring book. And this coloring book is so freaking cute. Like, I know that I'm the one that added this to my wish list, but I didn't even realize just how adorable this coloring book is. I'm just gonna show y'all a couple of the pages I'm really excited about coloring, okay? Like, look at the cute little potions! And these are some little ghosties that I started on. I love that this one is so interested in soup. It speaks to me. These ones legitimately look like things that I would want tattooed on my body. So like that's how much I love the artwork in this particular coloring book. And I also appreciate the fact that the backs of each of the coloring pages is black, which it doesn't help it not bleed through, but it does help it not show through on the back. So I just think that's really cool, and it's really thoughtful for the person who made the coloring book to do. It's also like pretty thick for being a coloring book, so I'm very stoked about it. And the note that came with this one says, I'm so proud of you for prioritizing your mental health. Congratulations on the new magazine column, from Nicole in Michigan. Thank you, Nicole. I literally, like, I sat down and I started coloring in this book yesterday when I was trying to do the self-care stuff, and it occurred to me that the mental health wish list is literally doing exactly what I intended it to do. It's actually helping my mental health, and I just wanted to share that with all y'all. So thank you. But yeah, that is it for this week. But yeah, overall, I do feel like I'm doing a little bit better. I still definitely need some time because I have a problem where when my mental health starts to get a little bit better and starts to gain a little bit of momentum, I tend to want to race to the finish line, and I'm like, okay, everything's better now. And then I start doing all the things again, and then I start burning myself out again immediately. So I know that I still need more time, even though I'm feeling good this week. It doesn't mean that I am 100% healed. And I know that that can be a little bit difficult for people who don't experience mental health issues to understand, because to other people, a lot of times depression or anxiety might just seem like a bad day rather than like a state of mind that you are in. And it is certainly a lot more to it than that, and it's just something that, you know, grow through what you go through. Healing isn't linear, etc., etc. And as usual, if you've made it to the end of the video, they still don't have a name. I've gotten several suggestions, and I do like some of these suggestions, but I would like to have a few more suggestions before I have people vote on a name, because I would love for y'all to be involved in naming them. So feel free to leave them in the comments.